Hello and welcome. I'm Sarah, and today's video is a video about leptin and also the way of looking at hormones and quantum biology through a quantum lens, as well as food. So this is a presentation I made in 2024, last year in January, for my group. And it's a very good introductory video for people who are new to this channel, who are new to leptin, who are new to hormones or new to quantum biology. Then the second part of the video is one I made for my group about 3 weeks ago. And as you know, I'm forever diving into rabbit holes, expanding my knowledge, learning new things about biophysics, energy, and different ways to approach the body from biochemical and biophysical routes. And this goes into more detail about what steals your charge or lowers your redox, because fundamentally leptin is measuring the energy status of your body at an electromagnetic level. So it's in simple terms as well. It's designed for lay people and those who are new, as I said. And I've also touched a bit on low leptin as well as high leptin. So let's begin. I'm just going to go over the leptin reset in a nutshell. It's just because sometimes people get really bogged down in things or get really hung up about certain aspects of it. Right. Okay. So with the leptin reset or leptin prescription, you have to kind of bear in mind that these are sort of marketing terms to gain interest. And it also gives person a goal of what they're going to achieve at the end. And then people get really hung up on just leptin or just and what the leptin reset really is, it's about reconnecting with nature, correcting a circadian rhythm, depleting deuterium, improving your mitochondria, making more exclusion zone water, which is what we're going to go into later when we look at the heart, and recharging your batteries, as in that can mean batteries or it can mean emotional batteries, or it can mean coming out of fight or flight mode, but it also means recharging your biological batteries, so things like melanin, your water battery, and vitamin D. So when we talk about the environment, because this is all really important in anything to do with resetting leptin, overcoming something like chronic fatigue or adrenal fatigue, or just for people who just want to go to the next level, or people who are interested in sort of lifespan and stuff like that. So when we talk about the environment, we mean different wavelengths of light, and there are trillions of those. We've got electromagnetic fields, so not just EMFs, other people's electromagnetic fields, electromagnetic fields of the earth, the Schumann resonance, all kinds of things. Then obviously there's information from food and water, because they provide information, not just kind of a taste in our mouths or energy. And then the breath is really important because the lungs contain POMC, so they're one of your surfaces. Sounds matter in the environment because something stressful can raise somebody's cortisol, and that's going to affect their hormones and their sleep. Vibration is important, smell and taste, and then we have pressure, sort of touch, weighted blankets, all sorts of things like that. And then we've got the internally generated images and thoughts, because this is again why I keep mentioning mindset or meditation and different kinds of ways that you can engage with your active imagination, because if you can't visualize your goal, it's going to be really difficult for you to get there. And also we visualize all kinds of negative things, or think people said or thought stuff about us when they haven't, or we imagine something happening in the future that hasn't already, which is sort of anxiety. But we can obviously generate positive images, and when we get to torus fields at the end for the heart, you'll see why I've brought this up. So just a recap. So quantum biology begins in the eye, and we've got photoreceptors in the eye, and they capture signals from the sun, and they convey this to the rest of the body. And all of the programs for growth and metabolism are actually in the eye as well. Our skin is our secondary master clock, and we want as much light as match between the skin and the eyes. So things like clothes, glass, and lenses are going to disturb the eyes and the skin. And like I mentioned, the lungs are a surface as well, as is the gut. And these are both responsive to light too. And also the gut and the lungs are really important detox routes because people think it's just the liver that does it. We've got other organs and things which are important. So we're going to talk about the heart later because I think it's really important. So when we just go back to the basics of the leptin reset, if we don't have enough electrons, we can't charge them with light, and every single electron's identical until we put information in. So food has electrons in it, and so does water, and that's going to carry information, positive or negative, when it comes to water and food. And the photoelectric effect is the sunlight charging electrons in your body and giving you energy. So like a solar panel. So this is vital for the leptin reset. And the other thing that electrons do is they act as antioxidants everywhere in the body, and they can penetrate deep into cells, the same as hydrogen can, because they can get past the exclusion zone water, the water shell, whereas supplements and things can't. We make our own antioxidants, like we can make glutathione ourselves with melatonin. So that they get into cells because we made them. But fundamentally, the hydrogen and the electron are the primary antioxidants in the body. So if we have too much deuterium and not enough hydrogen, that's going to be inflammatory. And if we don't have enough electrons and too many protons, as in being too acidic in terms of a quantum, not from eating acidic food, that's going to be inflammatory as well. So we can gather electrons from the ground, and people think they dismiss it all the time, but don't realize how important it is. And then we lose electrons from tech, alcohol, and other things. So without enough electrons, your solar panel part of yourself isn't going to work properly. And then leptin sensing system is going to sense an energy deficit. And a free radical is something, it's a molecule that's got an unpaired electron on it. So it's not a free electron. And these are only bad when there's too many of them and when they're in the wrong place. So I've drawn a picture here of something called a Jablonski diagram, and this just shows how many, all these different possibilities of when you excite an electron, uh, what happens. And then as the electrons travel around the body, they drop down back to the ground state and give off sort of information. So that's how you can store information in an electron. So it's information as well as being an antioxidant, as well as being something that can trap light for you. So they're fundamentally important in the leptin reset. So if people just did the food bit and didn't bother to do any grounding, you're not going to get as far as you'd like. Because I don't have any issue. Obviously, I think nutrition is really important, but it can only take you so far. Then the next really important thing is the mitochondria. So if you've got bad mitochondria, you're not very efficient at processing food or making energy and water. So sometimes you can't fix the engine by putting a different fuel in, although having an appropriate fuel is going to support the engine. But fundamentally, the mitochondria need sunlight, and they need what comes out of the sun, and most of it's near infrared. About 10% is visible, and then the rest is ultraviolet. So it fundamentally depends on that, and they don't like bits of the electromagnetic spectrum that we made, and people dismiss this all the time. And I agree, there's nothing we can do about some of it, but there's a lot we can do about different parts of this electromagnetic spectrum that the mitochondria and the heart really dislike. And when we do or look at a circadian or leptin reset, there are certain sort of important times of the day we've got to get light because it's different throughout the day. So in the morning at sunrise, we've got red, blue, violet light, and this basically switches on your hormones ready for the day. So it activates the central retinol pathway, which is really important for your energy status. And it helps you make cortisol. So cortisol isn't bad at all. It's only bad at the wrong time of day, like when you're trying to go to sleep at night or something like 1 a.m. Other than that, you'll die without cortisol, but there's specific levels it should be. And the sun is the best controller of making it be the right level in the morning. And also we switch on a hormone cascade at sunrise. So if you miss it, then you missed it. You can't get it back. So it's basically your on switch. Then the next important part of the day is the UVA. So that comes out about an hour to 90 minutes after sunrise, but it depends on your location. So you look in the app called Circadian or on the internet, because there are websites that will tell you. And this is where you make serotonin, dopamine, thyroid hormones, endocannabinoids, endorphins, enkephalins. So it's basically to get high on your own supply, because we can make all of these things ourselves. And, you know, on another level, there are plenty of meditative practices where people can actually have psychedelic experiences. So we've got the capacity to make even more out of our biological pharmacy. But for the sake of normal day living, we have to have these to function. And also not enough serotonin affects people later because they can't make enough melatonin. Dopamine is really important for our energy status, and if it's dysregulated, we can have addictions, lack of motivation, things like that. Again, thyroid hormone is very tied to the light cycle and UVA light. And many people complain about sort of pain and things like that. So enkephalins and endocannabinoids are important in sort of our sensations. Endocannabinoids are really complicated, but really interesting. That's why personally I'd never mess with them anymore other than using the sun. And then enkephalins, they're a bit like dopamine, but in a different way. It sort of gives you pleasure. And if people don't make enough enkephalins, they'll go off and look for pleasure in alcohol or drugs or food, all sorts of things. So this UVA morning light is about making our own supply and opening the biological pharmacy. Then any time in the day when there's UVA light, we can make melanin via the POMC pathway and alpha MSH. And melanin, the more I learn about it, the more, you know, fascinated by it I am. So Keiko posted a really good paper this morning about actual proper sort of getting sort of more strong studies about how lack of melanin in the brain is linked to dementia, all kinds of brain disorders, Parkinson's. And I know Dr. Cruz has been saying this for 15 years, but sometimes there's not enough data out there yet to prove what his hypothesis was, but he has been correct. And then melanin, like I've said before, it doesn't just bind the electromagnetic spectrum of light, it binds toxins and all sorts. It also makes water, electrons, and hydrogen. And the melanin itself, just even in your skin, acts as a barrier. So it's just a multi-purpose compound, and you can make that yourself from going out in the UVA light. You make the internal or some of the internal melanin by doing cold plunges, because that's like a different route. Then the UVB, which isn't here all the time in some places, that's for making vitamin D, which then goes on to make many other hormones and has lots of roles in immunity, bone health, sex hormone regulation. It plays a role in leptin signaling because it's a energy storing molecule. And there are ways around vitamin D in sort of the northern latitudes, because we can store vitamin D in fat. So that's why doing leptin sort of resets for weight loss or fasting or whatever in winter is a really good idea, because you're going to release some of your vitamin D out of the fat cells. And there are studies on this. People have known this for ages. The blue light from the sun is always balanced by red light, and this improves metabolism. And there are papers showing that this can modulate and shrink fat cells as well. So it's the artificial blue that's the problem, not any blue light that comes from the sun, because the artificial blue light's going to raise cortisol, raise blood sugar, interfere with vitamin A and damage it. It damages DHA in the eye and it destroys melatonin. So there's a big list of why artificial blue light is a big problem, whether you want to reset leptin or not. It's something that's going to get in the way of all sorts of different health goals, whether it's an exercise goal, a motivation goal, a health goal. So just to break that down into, well, what am I supposed to do about that? So if there's four things. If you just see the sunrise with naked eyes while grounded in the morning for 30 minutes or more, naked is best. but anything is better than nothing. Even if you open the window and look out of it, or let some light in through the curtains, so you'd see the sunrise first with naked eyes, and the more you do, the better the results will be, and you can just build up over time. It's the same with the UVA light. 30 minutes or more grounded in the morning when the UVA is out is better. And if all you can do is open a window at work or at school or whatever, I mean, there are teachers here, then that's going to have to do. And nobody's going to object to anybody opening the window. Even if they ask you to shut it again in 5 minutes, at least you let the UV in and some infrared. And then blue blocking glasses and blocking bright light in the evening. So red light panels are LEDs and they have very high power, so they count as bright light after sunset. And then limit screens to 1.5 to 2 hours or more before bed. So that's the kind of broken down bit, and it looks really simple, just 4 things, but this can take people ages to get going with. And it doesn't have to be overcomplicated, and you don't even need to know anything about what's happening at these times of the day with your body. You just need to know that it's all beneficial, and nobody's going to do all of this properly and then say, oh no, I feel worse. Then the other really fundamental part of quantum biology is your 4th phase of water, your gel water or your structured water. And this forms on every single hydrophilic surface in the body. And this is absolutely vital for how the heart works, but also in terms of energy. 1 hexagon is going to pop out 1 electron, and there's going to be millions and millions and millions of hexagons in your body. So the more exclusion zone water you make and keep, the more electrons you're going to have. So this is a positive situation for having good energy status and helping to reset sort of your leptin signaling, because if leptin signaling's gone wrong, it's just your body thinking there's an energy crisis. So we've got numerous ways to tackle this problem. So the brain has the most easy water in the body, and nobody's really looked into this fully. And like I said, it coats all surfaces in the body. It also hydrates all of our proteins and our carbon semiconductor system. So it's part of our water battery. It's very important for how blood flow and heart health happen. And it's important for making the ATPase spin in the mitochondria. So it's actually a water and light effect that makes your ATPase spin. And it just produces more ATP, which is a form of energy, but it's not the be all and end all. The EZ is vital for detoxification, because when the water separates out and makes an exclusion zone, nothing can go in that, and it forms a protective barrier against everything around your cells. So things that provoke your body, toxins, metals, pharmaceuticals, all sorts of things will be excluded from going anywhere that they could be a nuisance. And also it's important for hydrating collagen, because if collagen starts to get dry and sticky, that's one part of sort of regional pain syndromes and fibromyalgia. The fascia's getting sticky and rubbing on itself rather than sliding. So when we come to how do we lose water, or what are the problems here? So not enough near infrared light, and the sun produces 43% near infrared light. So that's the best provider, because the near infrared bounces off the dirt, the plants and everything outside, and you get 360 degrees illumination. And it's there 24 hours a day, and it balances the effects of other light. You can obviously get near infrared panels, but they only produce 1 or 2 wavelengths of near infrared, whereas the sun's going to produce trillions, and the sun knows better than anything that you plug in the wall. But with it, using panels sensibly can be beneficial, but it'll all end in tears if you just keep thinking you need a bigger one and you need to do more and more. Technology is a massive stealer of water, all of it, unfortunately. Losing connection from the earth as well. So if you're constantly insulated and you're never grounded, that's going to impact your exclusion zone water. Eating a high carb diet without enough UV light, or deuterium depletion, or eating a high carb diet in blue light, that's going to cause problems with water production, because fat produces more water in the mitochondria than glucose does. And blue light blocks the complex 4 in the mitochondria. That's the water factory. So now with the deuterium, so the mitochondria make deuterium depleted water, and if they work properly, it'll have no deuterium at all. And if you have fat as your predominant fuel, or you're a good fat burner, then your mitochondria are going to make water. And in terms of food, fat produces one equivalent of water, protein about 0.75, and glucose about half. So it doesn't mean that eating carbs is bad, because there's reasons to do that. It just means overall fat is going to make more exclusion zone water. Then the other thing which is really important in the leptin reset, or just health in general, is having enough DHA, because DHA, the omega-3 that comes from seafood, it lines all the membranes in the body and it's hydrophilic. So this is important for building your water battery. So it's just a way of how things all start to link up. Then DHA converts light to direct current in the body and back to light again. And the information in the electrons that travel around through DHA, the information is very organized. So this is why DHA is really important for brain signaling, or what the information that goes around in the brain, because it can't be random, it has to be organized. And nobody disputes that omega-3 DHA is really important for the brain. Michael Crawford's been studying it for 50 years and he's got over 300 publications. And also DHA provides electrons. It's got a big cloud of them. So it's again another way to get electrons. So the electrons that come from DHA have got different information in them than food electrons or grounding electrons. And the electrons from grounding can go into the mitochondria and down the electron transport chain. That'll work fine. So it's all back to this idea of information, that we want to bring coherent information into the body, and your body knows best. It knows what to do if you give it the right ingredients and the right information. So again, is it just about food? No, but it is important, because I've tried doing things with people, and if they just eat sort of the wrong food, as in like won't stop eating junk food or keep overeating, it doesn't work properly. I mean, obviously they're going to fix their body clocks and things like that, so it's not useless. But a lot of people also want other health benefits. So from doing a low carb or keto diet, which the leptin reset originally is, we can accomplish some of these things. So we can make more easy water, because it's more of a fat-based diet. Keto and carnivore and low carb tend to be low deuterium, so that deals with that problem. And also when you're in ketosis, you slightly uncouple in the mitochondria, and this squashes the electron transport chain a bit closer together. So it runs better, because it's easier for the electrons to go down the chain, because distance matters a lot in quantum biology. So if this chain spreads out, which is mitochondrial heteroplasmy, it just makes everything less efficient in the mitochondria. And thermodynamic inefficiency is part of leptin resistance and other things as well. So yes, the keto diet can accomplish these things, but it can't do anything about having a bad body clock. It can't do anything about too much blue light. It can't do anything about non-native EMFs, but it's a start, and it is important. And I know there are people that try and say the food doesn't matter, but unfortunately it does. But it's not the be all and end all either, like some people seem to think. I want to thank my sponsor, Lightwater Scientific, who helped me deliver free valuable information to you, and also allow me to have great guests on this channel. Lightwater Scientific produce the purest and most deuterium-depleted water in the world. Depleting or lowering your deuterium has numerous health benefits, from better metabolic health, more energy, greater resilience, less brain fog, increased physical performance, enhanced healing, and healthier mitochondria. Deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen, also known as heavy water, because it's bigger and heavier than regular hydrogen. Even though deuterium makes up only 0.02% of hydrogen, it's found everywhere. Deuterium is a burden to your body because it interferes with the intricate chemical reactions that occur by slowing them down. Deuterium is kryptonite to your mitochondria, and we need healthy mitochondria to produce energy. There's over 60 years of scientific research on the negative effects of too much deuterium on health and also the positive benefits of lowering deuterium in the body. Light water, deuterium depleted water, is 100% safe and non-toxic. In fact, it's the closest in structure to the metabolic water that your mitochondria produce. Light water, deuterium depleted water, comes in 5 or 10 parts per million glass or plastic bottles. So level up your health by leveling down your deuterium today. The purchase link is in the show notes, and use code Dr. Sarah for a discount off your order. So just breaking the food bit down in very simple ways. Always have breakfast and have fat and protein like a queen or a king. Have lunch and have dinner. And if it gets to dinner time and you're not hungry, then don't have it, and include seafood. Eat low deuterium food if you can. If you accidentally eat a chocolate bar, then it doesn't matter, so what? But just, make an effort to limit things like that. And if you're not getting the results you want, then you have to really address that situation. Eat seasonally and locally so you don't give your mitochondria confusing information, like eating mangoes in the UK right now would be very confusing for them. Don't drink alcohol because it's oxidative. It disturbs multiple things in the body. It steals electrons. It interferes with melanin making and breaking water. And it's more energy dense than carbs and protein, and it inhibits fat burning, if that's what you're interested in, as in just a classical biochemical way, for ages, because the liver's really busy trying to deal with the toxin you put in. So it doesn't mean you have to be teetotal forever, but if you're doing some kind of group health activity for, say, 3 weeks or for 6 months, it's worth just leaving it out, and a lot of people feel much better. And then you can do what you want with the rest of your life. Obviously, I'm not saying you have to never drink. Then the other thing I've found with working with people in the leptin reset or anything sort of similar is like doing a keto diet and saying it doesn't work, is if you're inflamed or want to lose weight, then avoid dairy, processed pork and burgers, regular grade um, dark chocolate and nuts until you're ready to have them again later. So there's nothing wrong with the dark chocolate and the nuts, and there's nothing wrong with raw dairy. It's just when people have specific goals, especially weight loss, for some reason, especially in women and me as well, these foods seem to be particularly problematic, and they can be problematic for people with inflammation as well. But like everything, inflammation isn't evil either, because we get inflamed after exercising because it's just part of the process. But it's inflammation constantly that's dragging you down. And it's, like I said, just until you're ready to have them again as a treat. So they're not, contraband or anything. It's just sometimes I just find things that move the needle for certain people, and those particular foods just happen to be a problem. If you want to make your own burger, that's totally different out of grass-fed beef. But anything that you buy is being fiddled about with, and it's just better. It's got all sorts in it. So just pictorially, some people don't do a full keto diet on the leptin reset. They just eat a paleo diet, and that can have some fruit, nuts, root vegetables, and they just have 3 or 2 meals a day of this with no snacks, and they just leave out, again, processed foods. So that works for them. And paleo is a great route into changing a way of eating for anybody, because it's safe for everybody. So just for an example, getting started, say if a brand new person started today, I would start with them with quantum practices, the bare bones, which I was saying about your water, and then just the basics of circadian health. And then they would remove sugar, gluten, soy, and seed oils, and they do those 2 things. And then maybe later they'd move into paleo. And if they wanted to go into low carb or keto or carnivore, they'd go in that route. So for some people, just removing sugar, gluten, soy, and seed oils for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and then you'll just not miss them anymore with quantum practices. That can get people a long way, because it just depends on where you're coming from. And then, because the presentation, as you can see, is about leptin reset and how it's actually much more than that. But also, it's not just about leptin anyway. It's also it's exactly the same process for raising redox, which we could call our charge or our power.
It's also deuterium depleting. Some people say that the leptin reset's just deuterium depletion in disguise. Also, it's a mitochondrial upgrade and it's a hormone balance. Because when you talk about leptin, a lot of people think it's just to do with weight, and for a large proportion of people, that's not their main concern at the moment, although for some people it is. So we'll get into it and we'll go through it. So fundamentally, because leptin and redox and deuterium and things like that, it's all to do with how much power or charge we've got. So with deuterium, it's like a heavy hydrogen. So for lots of reasons, it's a burden on the body. And I discover sort of new reasons all the time. So in terms of what power us, it's electric currents, and there are hundreds of currents in the body. So not just semiconduction, not just DHA being able to act as a semiconductor, not just nerves. There's all sorts of currents that happen, like DNA can act as a superconductor. There's all sorts of electrical activity, and it's not just electrons moving, it's also protons, so you can get a positive or proticity charges in the body as well. And we can get charge or things moving in a vortex, so like a rotating charges in the body as well. And something called non-destructive charge collapse, which relates to rotating charge in the body, is life force, consciousness, and gravity. We'll come back to gravity another time because, weirdly enough, it's really important in quantum biology and nobody really mentions it. And then in terms of other things, just as important would be light. So the sun powers us, and then we make light ourselves in the body. Lots of cells make light. We've got molecules that can catch light and store it and share it with other molecules. The cells emit light, not just even UV. There's going to be sort of, well, other colors and things. And the mitochondria emit light as well, different colors. And then we've got our water. So not just the water we drink in a glass, I mean the water the mitochondria make. That's really important for what powers us. And then the coherent water. So that's our easy water, or the gel water, or the coherent water, or the stuff that's on all our membranes, and it covers all of our molecules. And water can be charged up by UV light and red light, and then its charge separates, and then that means protons and electrons can move about. So now we've got charge or currents moving. And then food is important, but it's like a secondary thing that powers us. It's like 30%. And then if we now think about leptin, because the whole thing is, we said we were doing a leptin rebalancing. So basically, leptin links in with all of this because it's an electromagnetic energy accountant that basically tells your brain how much energy or power or charge or resources you have on board. And then it controls other hormones like thyroid, which relates into how much energy we use or not, insulin, which is a growth and storage hormone. So it plays a role in how we use energy. And then sex hormones, because they also play roles in building things in the body or making things or powering mood. And then the other thing that leptin does, which is tied in, it sort of dictates how much energy can be allocated to things like the immune system, bones, or baby making. So that's why it controls other hormones, because if it's an energy accountant, it has to be in charge of other things in the body that govern metabolic rates or appetite, or which organs and which bits of the body are going to get the energy. And then when it comes to how the immune function, the immune system, if you want to call it that, works, it's actually very dependent on electricity. So if you've got low redox, then the immune system's going to struggle. It's like it needs power to run as well. And then if we don't have enough energy to repair bones or muscle or things like that, then there's a problem. And also leptin's really important for fertility, especially in women. So it does play a role in regulating menstrual cycles. And it plays more of a role in controlling insulin in men, because men are more likely to get insulin resistant than women are. We're a bit more resistant to that, but women tend to get more problems with leptin being too high or too low or leptin resistant, but men get it as well. So then the question comes, how do we lose power or charge or electrons? So first of all, just in very simple terms, if we don't have enough sunlight to charge us up in the day, then we're going to be short of energy, sort of like a solar panel that's broken. And then we need to store energy and stuff from the sun in the daytime because we need enough charge to be able to actually sleep, because the way in which our electric currents work in the body at night is different. We run much less power, basically just like a city. Less power is being used in the nighttime. So we have to make sure we've made enough energy in the daytime, because again, with sleeping, that's another big problem that people can have. And you need energy to be able to calm down and to also to be able to sleep and stay asleep. Then we can lose our charge by losing our EZ water or coherent water in the body, because this is going to, first of all, make us lose hydrogen and also electrons, as well as just the structure of the water. So it's like we've just got less water battery to go around. Shrinking of the biofield and the aura, because they're actually a cloud of charge that rotates. So that's another place where there's electrical energy available for use. So there's all different things we'll go into later about auras and biofields, because they are one in the same thing in some ways, but then the aura is sort of more complicated and not as well studied. But Konstantin Korotkov, he's a Russian scientist, he measures auras and he's got a whole lab and machines for measuring auras. I think I've mentioned him before. Then just not having enough electrons, it's full stop, that's going to drain our batteries. So that would just be things like not enough grounding or never grounding, being around too much tech, things like alcohol, which steal electrons, other oxidizing agents like alcohol would steal electrons. Then we've got things like artificial light, because that's going to steal melatonin, and that's part of our energy system because it's a daytime and a nighttime hormone, not just a sleeping hormone. So it can process and store light, and it's part of our energy balancing. Then artificial light steals dopamine, and that governs our energy status in its own way, along with other things. And artificial light disturbs water production in the mitochondria at complex 4. The other thing where we can lose charge is pain. So there's different explanations of how and why this happens. So some people will say that pain is when the nerves just can't take the charge that's coming down them. So we feel the pain and they burn out. And then on a more sort of deep physics level, it's to do with a fractal that's broken and it leaks charge. So there are different ways that a biologist or a biophysicist or a complete physicist would describe it. So pain and charge being leaked is something that people neglect, and it's really important. And dealing or fixing physical pains can often help people move on and deal with other metabolic problems. So there are all kinds of different things which can reduce pain. For example, say the light wave patch. So some people do get more energy and lose weight on it, not because it did anything to their metabolism, it just got rid of their pain and the leaking charge stopped. But also with movement and proper rehabilitative movements, Z health, all sorts of different things, energy healing, whatever you can think of for dealing with actual physical pain is a way to deal with sort of charge leakage out of physical pain. Then things like not having enough melanin and vitamin D, as in the active vitamin D, because they trap light, because they can store it and hold on to it and in some ways sort of use it later. And then when it comes to the active vitamin D, if it got made out of vitamin D you made from the sun, the storage vitamin D, it's going to have all the light that it caught from the UVB stored in it, and then it turns into active D. So people get really stressed out about storage vitamin D levels. And if their active vitamin D is fine, then everything's good. Then there are things in the body like with vortexes, like the heart, the way it pumps, it vortexes blood. So that can make voltage and gravity. And the heart's sort of much more important than people think. And if you know anybody with a heart trouble, I've met lots of people, they tend to be tired. And then there's the coherence in the body. So not just the heart and brain coherence, that's the most important one of stuff being this is to do with waves in the body being lined up. There are other waves, like the craniosacral pump wave needs to be in coherence with the Mayer wave, which is the actual sort of blood flow rhythm. And there are a few others as well. But, we've got alpha and beta and gamma and delta brain waves, and these all need to be lined up properly because this is part of the electrics of the body. So if they're all messy and all over the place, it's just a way to either not make enough charge or not use it properly. Then, like I said, artificial light also damages retinol or vitamin A, which is an important part of the central retinol pathway. So that's a higher level than the leptin melanocortin pathway. So again, it's an energy governing pathway. And also the blue light damages melanopsin, and that's sort of the other sort of part of of how leptin works. It doesn't just work on its own. There are other opsins and molecules that it needs to team up with to work. Then I mentioned before, too much deuterium. That's a way to have an energy burden in the body because first of all, it can break the mitochondria because it goes in the ATPase, a little motor, and blocks it up and it stalls, but then it eventually is going to damage that mitochondria and kill it. And it'll pump out a lot of inflammatory chemicals into the body, and then you lose mitochondria. So obviously, if you lose mitochondria or they're sick, that's another way that you can leak charge out because if the mitochondria are all swollen, the electrons trying to go down the electron transport chain, it's further than if the mitochondria are the right size. So the electrons are more likely to get lost on the way, and that would be termed a free radical that's not a nice free or helpful free radical. Then things like incoherent and out of time biochemical reactions from a bad circadian rhythm. This is just an energy burden on the body because it's like when there's too many windows open on the computer or the iPhone needs a software update. It's just stuff's not running properly and everything gets slow and sticky and doesn't work properly and stuff like that. Then not moving, because when we move, because of the piezoelectrics of collagen, we make our own electrons that way. So it doesn't have to be CrossFit or anything like that, just mobility. There's hundreds of different things that people can do to just move their fascia, move about, get their collagen making electrons, encourage the collagen to stay nice and wet. Because then if the collagen gets all stuck and sticky or dry, then you're open up to pain now. And like I said before, that's a route where you can leak charge or energy or whatever you want to call it. And anything to do with losing energy on an electromagnetic or quantum level, that's the kind of thing that leptin measures. So it can't measure or see body fat. It gets made by fat. So when we get into sort of different high or low leptins, I'll mention that again. And then things like anger and hate and negative thoughts, they're very draining, not just emotionally, but on a physics level of being able to access bliss states and coherence in the brain and the heart and the body. Anger and hate and negative thoughts, those kind of waves are not shareable or compressible. So it doesn't work properly the same as working or living from a seat of love. I used to think it was sort of cheesy, the whole do everything from a seat of love, but there's actually a lot of physics to explain it now. And, most people will agree that it's very tiring to be angry and hateful and have negative thoughts. And also emotional problems tie into sort of eating problems as well. So just from a quantum lens, I was looking at it as well, that it makes sense in terms of what kind of waves are made when we're angry or hateful versus the kind of waves we make when we're in a loving state. So it does change the metabolism as well. Then sort of on a more traditional level, the biochemical energy stealers would be things like inflammatory food, So things like processed food, unfortunately, like bread now, just because it's just over glutenized, seed oils, food with confusing information. So stuff that's made in a factory, fruit out of season, or from fruit from very, very far away, is very confusing for the body. So it's just an extra faff to try and process it, but also because the mitochondria are a hub of sort of energy production for us, and they're a site where we can lose electrons if you're not putting the right food in, and then the information and the electrons and stuff are going into the mitochondria with weird information. It's just opening it up for not a smooth sort of function in the mitochondria. Then also the wrong fuel for the mitochondria. So obviously too much glucose all the time is going to make free radicals all the time, because they'll escape out of complex one, because complex one leaks. But that's sort of for a reason. People agree on this, saying that fats are less inflammatory fuel than glucose, which it is. Then we've got things like heavy metals, just because they take the place of minerals in enzymes, and then the enzymes don't work properly. So then other biochemical processes are slowed down. And the more metals you've got, the more it's going to be a burden. And it's the same for general unnecessary chemicals and toxins and plastic, because the liver's a very busy organ, and it's got better things to do than just constantly try and deal with a ton of supplements or meds or artificial stuff or whatever you can think of. But it's a very powerful organ, and it does regenerate. Then gut issues are obviously going to be something that's an energy stealer. First of all, because it's very complicated in the gut. Secondly, because it's a route where we need to absorb nutrients. Then again, gut tissues can be very painful. So we've got gut pain being a place where we can leak energy from. Then iron overload is something that's going to steal energy, because too much iron is going to suffocate the mitochondria, because it's how it relates to oxygen and copper. And if the iron's sitting on the oxygen, then the oxygen is not going to be available for the mitochondria, because that's how we make the water. That we need the oxygen to go in and mix with the electrons, and then we get and the hydrogen in the mitochondria, then we get water. So if there's iron, too much of it sitting about in the mitochondria, then it's like something stealing the oxygen. But also the iron gets in the way of the liver trying to process things and hormones and stuff like that. And also iron's oxidative, so it's an electron stealer. So you don't actually rust inside if you have too much iron. That's sort of just sometimes a simple way, but it's just not friendly when there's too much of it. And then again, if there's not enough of it, then there's a problem, because it's important for making blood cells and making some neurotransmitters. And then, of course, sort of low copper or other minerals is going to be an energy burden, just because minerals participate in so many biochemical reactions. And if you're missing some, the biochemical reaction's not going to run properly. Then the next thing that people often ask is low and high leptin the same? So no, that they have similarities though. And all of the things I've just described, which are basically, I didn't mention food really, just because I wanted to look at it from a quantum lens and other things that's applicable to everybody. So all of the things I've just described can relate into both high and low leptin. But generally, low leptin is more linked to undereating and over-exercising, and also very low body fat percent, because leptin gets made in fat cells. And if there are hardly any fat cells, it just makes sense there's not going to be very much leptin. But that person might be really sensitive to the little amount of leptin that they have. So there's always ways to look at things, because just because somebody's leptin looks normal, it doesn't mean that their body's leptin sensitive. So they might still have all the problems of leptin resistance. Then the other thing about low leptin that's really important, that it can relate to a trauma. So not necessarily emotional. It could be having a severe illness and having to have heavy medication or something like chemotherapy, feeling threatened all the time. So like a unsafe house because of whatever, or feeling like they're under attack. So they're being under attack, that's often something to do with, like families or partners or workplaces or the internet, or just generally being in a fear mindset. And there's also the low leptin people tend to try so hard to be perfect, they actually cause problems for themselves. That's another trait I've noticed. So the one thing that is different is the way of eating is different for low leptin compared to high leptin. And then finding the cause of low or high leptin is really important. So it's like finding out what was the thing that caused it in the first place, because it could be 5 things, it could be 2 main things, or it could be 10 things all contributing. So finding out what made the problem in the first place is also important.
Thank you for watching. I hope you found this interesting. If you want to access the rest of the videos and all my other recordings relating to leptin, then there's an offer on. It's 10% off for a limited amount of time, and you can have access to all the recordings and some handouts and some PDFs as well. And the links in the description. If you just use Leptin 10, if you want 10% off, or alternatively, you can access the recordings by joining my membership group. So remember to check out my other social media channels, my Substack, for further information on quantum biology, leptin, and the ways of looking through the body using physics. And this also includes things like consciousness and lucid dreaming and all the kind of fun stuff relating to consciousness as well.